The Supreme Court today overturned a lower court's acquittal of Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung on election law violation charges, setting a rule as to what amounts to freedom of expression and what constitutes falsehood for someone running for political office. This comes at a critical time when the presidential election is only about a month away. Acting President Han Duck-soo resigned today. He is expected to officially announce his presidential bid tomorrow. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok will serve as the caretaker once again. Korea has been officially confirmed as the contractor for the Czech Republic's new nuclear power plant project, setting another milestone 16 years after its last overseas nuclear plant project. It's May 1st, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We'll start with a major ruling today ahead of the presidential election next month. The Supreme Court today returned to the High Court an election law violation case against DP's presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung with the intent of a guilty verdict. It set the rule by drawing a line between what amounts to freedom of expression and what constitutes false information when it comes to statements by candidates that could affect voters. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
The Supreme Court has sent the election law violation case of Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung back to the High Court. The top court was split 10-2. It had a full bench oversee the case and reviewed it at an unusual fast pace ahead of the upcoming presidential election. Thursday's ruling follows an appeal by prosecutors against a high court ruling in March that had overturned an initial guilty verdict by a local court. In the initial verdict by Seoul Central District Court in November, it was convicted of making false statements in 2021 leading up to the presidential campaign in the following year. The Supreme Court on Thursday also provided guidelines for determining which statements by candidates are considered false. Regarding the meaning of expressions, the court emphasized that it should be interpreted from the perspective of the general voter, not the candidate or the court itself. When judging false facts, it emphasized that it's important to consider whether the statement is minor and doesn't affect voters' judgment or if it's significant enough to mislead them. In this regard, the court ruled that e-statements are considered as spreading false information under Public Official Election Act. Lee Jae-myung did not appear in court on Thursday as defendants are not required to be present. He said the ruling is completely different from what he believed.
The ruling is completely different from what I thought. The law is an agreement by the people, and the will of the people is what matters most.
The DP criticized the ruling, calling it clearly political and rushed, and accused the court of unfairly interfering in the presidential election. On the other hand, the People Power Party welcomed the ruling, called for Lee's resignation, and urged the DP to nominate a new candidate.
The Supreme Court confirmed that Lee distorted public judgment by spreading false information. That alone disqualifies him as a presidential candidate. Stepping down is just common sense.
Lee will now face a retrial at the Seoul High Court. Since the court must follow the Supreme Court's decision, he is expected to be found guilty. The court is expected to hold a sentencing hearing to decide Lee's sentence. Thursday's ruling drew much attention as it could have affected presidential frontrunner Lee's eligibility to run in the upcoming election. With the case sent back for a retrial, his candidacy remains unaffected since a final ruling has yet to be made. However, if he is elected before the ruling, it could spark controversy over whether the trial should be paused during his term. If the ruling comes before the election, and if Lee receives a fine of 1 million Korean won, about $700 or more, he would be barred from running for elections for 5 years, including the June 3rd election. If sentenced to a prison term, the ban extends to 10 years. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo stepped down from his position this afternoon. He is likely to make his presidential bid official in the near future. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young explains its implications.
Acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo resigned on Thursday in a bid to take on a, quote, greater responsibility just weeks before the June 3rd presidential election. In a televised address to the nation, Han bowed out of his position, saying he made the final decision to resign.
I have just left my position as acting president and prime minister.
Reflecting on South Korea's rapid economic development and 5 decades of its public service, the former official said the country now stands at the crossroads of domestic, economic and geopolitical complexities.
Will our economy, now ranked among the world's top 10, grow stronger and join the G7? Or will it stall and fall behind? Will Korean politics move toward cooperation or fall deeper into extremism? We are grappling with these two questions right now.
Between the choices of continuing his immediate duties or taking on a greater responsibility, Han said he decided to step down from his current role. Following the impeachment and removal of former President Yoon Suk-yeol, Han Duck-soo has been the nation's interim leader. While he was impeached himself by the National Assembly, the Constitutional Court restored him to his duties just 38 days ago.
Han's departure marks the third change of acting president since December, leaving the country's governance in the hands of Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok once again, until a new South Korean leader is elected.
Han's announcement comes just 3 days before the legal deadline for public officials to quit if they plan to run for president. He is expected to declare his candidacy on Friday as an independent and launch his campaign team on Saturday. For weeks, the 75-year-old bureaucrat has reportedly been urged by moderate conservatives in the People Power Party to enter the race. As the PPP's reputation suffers after former President Yoon declared martial law and was removed from office, Han is believed to be the most viable counterweight to the Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung, who currently leads the polls. If Han Duck-soo joins the race, he's expected to form a coalition with the PPP's final candidate and work to unite other anti-Lee Jae-myung figures, including former Prime Minister and DP defector Lee Na-kyun and Reform Party leader Lee Jun-seok. Those in favour of Han cite his experience of serving as Prime Minister under both Liberal and Conservative governments, as well as Finance Minister and Ambassador to the United States. Critics say Han was part of the impeached Yoon administration and that he should focus on preparing a smooth election, not running in it. Reacting to his resignation, the DP fiercely criticised Han, deeming his potential run for president a, quote, far ambition and threatening to scrutinise him as though ripping off every layer of an onion. Ahead of the PPP's final primary runoff, candidate Kim Moon-soo said he'd discuss a union with Han if he runs. Candidate Han Dong-un, meanwhile, said both Kim and the former acting president are remarkable people, but unable to defeat Lee Jae-myung. The PPP's runoff takes place this Saturday, leaving room for manoeuvring before candidate registrations for the race close on May 11th. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
A supplementary budget aimed at addressing disaster recovery, boosting exports, and supporting vulnerable groups comes following days of cross-party negotiations. The result is a compromise to expand the amount in the final package. Our economics correspondent Moon Hye-ryun has the details.
South Korea has taken a major step towards finalizing its first supplementary budget in 3 years, and the first drafted under an acting president. The two main political parties reached an agreement on Thursday to expand the package to 13.8 trillion Korean won, roughly $9.6 billion, up from the government's original 12.2 trillion won proposal. The budget targets three main priorities: disaster recovery, boosting exports and strategic technologies, and supporting vulnerable communities. A major driver of the budget's expansion is the response to devastating wildfires, which prompted an additional 200 billion won for disaster relief. This will help double the National Disaster Reserve and upgrade emergency equipment such as drones and AI surveillance systems. As global trade tensions and export slowdowns persist, the budget allocates 4 trillion won for high-tech industries, including policy financing, export programs, and AI semiconductor investment. Another key addition is 400 billion won for regional gift certificates, aimed at boosting consumption in small businesses and traditional markets. Funding for agricultural discounts has been expanded, along with scholarships for university students. With the IMF reducing South Korea's 2025 growth outlook to 1%, more funds have been directed to construction projects to stimulate domestic demand. Experts say this could be vital for job creation and economic recovery.
Reviving the construction sector can have a strong ripple effect. It helps boost employment among low-income, unskilled workers and contributes to faster recovery in domestic demand.
The supplementary budget also targets small businesses and vulnerable groups. Measures include a new burden relief credit for electricity and insurance bills, traditional market vouchers, and expanded loans for students and low-income youth. This emergency budget may serve as a stepping stone for more extensive fiscal action later this year. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Korea has officially clinched a nuclear power plant project in the Czech Republic, setting another milestone 16 years after its last overseas nuclear plant project. The two sides are scheduled to sit down next week in Prague to seal the deal. Lee Soo-jin has more.
South Korea has been officially confirmed as the contractor for the Czech Republic's new nuclear power plant project. Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala said on Wednesday that a contract to build 2 reactors at the Dukovany power plant will be signed with the state-run Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power on May 7th. This comes as the Czech government announced that it will take an 80% stake in a subsidiary of a state-run energy company CEZ in charge of construction to finance the project, resolving one of the key hurdles to finalizing the nuclear power deal with Korea. CEZ had been pursuing alternative financing options after the government expanded the project from a single unit to 2, estimated to cost more than 26 trillion won, or around $18 billion. The project marks the first export of a nuclear power plant by a South Korean company since the Baraka nuclear plant in the United Arab Emirates in 2009.
Korean companies and Korean government has come to establish very strong reputations because they successfully moved into the European market. We have struggled with the nuclear power plant due to our political tensions, but now this market is recovered due to heavy demand for AI and also war between Ukraine and Russia.
And if the Czech government later confirms plans to add 2 new units to the Temelin nuclear power plant, Korea is expected to be granted priority negotiation rights for that project too. A consortium led by the KHNP was selected in July 2024 as the preferred bidder to build the nuclear reactors, beating France's EDF and Westinghouse from the US thanks to its competitive pricing and ability to follow tight construction timelines. While the deal was supposed to be finalized in March this year, it was delayed following complaints filed by EDF and Westinghouse against the decision. But the path to moving forward with the deal was cleared as Westinghouse and KHNP in January reached an agreement to settle the intellectual property dispute, and Czech authorities dismissed EDF appeals in April. The trial operation of the first nuclear unit is set for 2036, with the second to follow shortly after, aligning with the Czech Republic's goal of having 50% of its energy generated by nuclear power by 2050. South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said that it welcomes the announcement of the official contract signing date and that it will make every effort to ensure a successful signing ceremony. The ceremony is expected to take place in Prague with representatives from KHNP and the CEZ subsidiary, as well as government officials from both countries. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Korea's exports stayed in the black in April, rising for the 3rd month in a row. Amid widespread concerns over U.S. tariffs, however, its shipments to the U.S. were down almost 7%. Moon Ji-young covers the latest finding.
South Korea's exports grew for the 3rd consecutive month in April, despite the impact of tariff imposed by the U.S., although outbound shipments to the U.S. saw a drop. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Thursday, the value of exports last month amounted to $58.2 billion, of 3.7% compared to the previous year. This marked the highest ever for any April. This growth comes as outbound shipments of semiconductors, the country's top export engine, surged by a whopping 17% on year to reach $11.7 billion. This is the highest figure for any April, driven by strong demand for high-value memory semiconductors such as HBM and price increases of DDR4 DRAM chips. Exports of wireless communications equipment, including smartphones, and exports of biohealth products also expanded by a large margin. While exports of steel and ships both increased, shipments of automobiles, another key export item, dropped almost 4% year-on-year. This decline was largely due to weaker demand for internal combustion engine cars and electric vehicles. Regionally, exports to China rose nearly 4% on year on strong demand for smartphones and semiconductors. Exports to the European Union also surged by more than 18%, setting a new monthly record of $6.7 billion. In contrast, outbound shipments to the U.S. decreased almost 7% year-on-year, mainly due to a drop in automobile and machinery exports.
High U.S. tariffs appear to have affected South Korea's exports to the U.S., though the degree of impact differs by sector.
In the midst of global trade uncertainties, some experts highlight the need to increase local production in response to strengthening trade barriers, especially on chips.
Rather than solely insisting on exports, pursuing a strategy of increasing local production, while potentially leading to short-term industrial hollowing out, is a necessary long-term approach to advance our industrial structure.
Meanwhile, the country's imports decreased by 2.7%, driven by a drop in energy imports. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of the Navy John Fallon has this week visited shipyards of South Korea's leading shipbuilding companies as part of the Trump administration's efforts to revive the U.S. shipbuilding industry. The office of the Secretary of the Navy said Thursday that Fallon visited Hanwha Ocean's shipyard in gov't and HD Hyundai Heavy Industries shipyard in Ulsan the day before. He stressed the importance of cooperation between the U.S. Navy and Korea's maritime industrial base, while adding that leveraging the expertise of these highly capable shipyards enables U.S. vessels to operate at peak performance. His visit comes after Trump earlier said the United States may purchase advanced ships from close countries. J-Hope, a member of South Korea's leading boy group BTS, will have the final show of his current world tour available for live viewing across 70 countries. Big Hit Music says Hope on the Stage will make its final stop in Osaka, Japan on May 31st, which will be available in a live cinema broadcast. Ticket purchases for the live viewing will begin on the 9th in Korea, and more than 90 movie theaters will be airing it. J-Hope's first solo world tour began in Seoul this February and is continuing its tour journey, which spans across 31 concerts in 15 regions in North America and Asia. A special exhibition marking the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation is now on display in central Seoul. Through pictures, poems, and documents, it offers a glimpse into the lives and emotions of those who lived through Korea's turbulent past. Our Lee Jae-myung has their story.
This year marks the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation, when Korea regained independence from Japan in 1945 after 35 years of colonial rule. To mark the anniversary and to show the daily lives of people during the colonial rule and other moments of Korea's recent history, the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History is holding a special exhibition called Records, Memory of You. The displays, including official documents, diaries, and literary works, show more than just historical facts. They reveal the human emotions of the time, hope, sorrow, and joy, so we can experience Korea's journey through the eyes of those who lived it. This young soldier, unable to write to his illiterate father, asked a journalist to take his photo to let him know he was alive. Tragically, he was killed in action the very next day. And this stack of letters was exchanged between a couple separated by the Vietnam War, offering a glimpse into their hope to be reunited. Korea's struggle and pride are reflected in key moments in sports history. From the 1936 Berlin Olympics, where a Korean athlete won gold in the marathon but had to stand under the Japanese flag, to the nation's first international sports victory after liberation, and its Olympics debuted under the name Korea. These milestones capture the resilience and determination of a country reclaiming its identity.
Even though it was a time we never lived through, seeing over 80 years since Korea's first Olympics appearance made me feel how far our country has come, and also gave me a strange nostalgic feeling, like I had been part of it.
I wanted to come to South Korea, to Republic of Korea, and visit and learn more about the history and arts and culture of the country. So this is actually my first stop. I arrived this morning, so I'm very happy to be here, and I find the exhibit to be fascinating and very emotional, actually, because it talks about the history of of what has happened in the recent past.
Held in collaboration with the Cheongju National Museum and the National Archives of Korea, the exhibition reminds us of the meaning of Gwangbok in Korean, meaning the restoration of lost sovereignty, and the importance of never forgetting those historic struggles. 이은희, Arirang News.
Rain has been falling from the morning across the country. The rain had meant most of the dry weather advisories have been lifted in inland areas, but dry weather warnings around the East Coast are still in effect with relatively less rain. Please take extra precautions to avoid any fires. Rain is accompanied by gusty winds. Currently, strong winds of more than 20 meters per second have been blowing on the west coast, and strong wind advisories have been issued. Also, wind wave advisories are in place around the West Sea and central parts of the East Sea. The wind is expected to be strong across the country. Tomorrow morning, we'll start off at 8 degrees Celsius in Chuncheon and Daejeon, 11 degrees in Busan. Highs will go up to around 20 degrees all over the country. The weather will be clear again tomorrow, but rain is forecast again on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.